afraid. He has got records to all of his activities as accountant general. And he said, if anybody wants to probe, let them probe. If anybody wants to ask a question, let them ask a question. He's not afraid because he was and still is accountable. He even mentioned that right now he is very much accountable to the people, even as governor. Every day he pens down a record as to how he has governed the state. You're welcome to Hard Facts on 92.3 Nigeria Info. I am Kala Dakorubatbo, and joining me on the show is the National Legal Advisor for the Committee for Defense of Defense of Human Rights. I was going to say democracy. For the Defense of Human Rights, Barrister Ekine. It's good to have you on the show, and greetings to you.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and good evening to our esteemed listeners.
All right, so just to give credence to what I'm trying to report, or what I'm attempting to report on the show, let's take a listen to the governor.
Is a government that is battered by high-level discipline. I don't know about other people that are working with me, but as a person, from the time I started working as a civil servant, from the time I worked in the office of accountant general with my boss that is here, there's something we don't play with. Record. I can boldly stand here to say that whatever that transpired right from the time we worked from 2007 to date, the records are there for anybody to go and see. Likewise, what has happened from the time of the middle past administration, the records are there. So I want to know, I was sitting here, not fair of the date. As a matter of fact, the record is even more excellent because I have day-to-day report of what I'm doing. So I'm not bothered. Call me any day, call me anytime. I will stand and defend every action, every decision that we have taken. So I want.
All right, so you heard it there by a second. I believe you also heard, but sound bites played. Okay, the first question is: can you divorce the office of the Accountant General from the activities of a governor or the activities of an executive governor? I'm asking this. The governor in that statement said that he has records. He kept records. And it sounded, so we found out saying, it's like if anything should, go wrong with your administration in terms of corruption, nothing really would touch me. Is that even possible?
When it comes to the code of public forms, the Constitution is very determined with respect to the control of public funds. To the extent that it provides for the establishment of consolidated revenue funds of both the federal and then the state government. So since we are discussing the state government, you could find that for us to be able to control public funds for accountability, it's expected that every revenue or every money generated and accruable to the state should be in the consolidated revenue fund.
Okay.
Then, of course, the law would also establish certain offices, public offices, for the purpose of overseeing or controlling public funds. And that would include the Auditor General of the state and, of course, the Accountant General of the state. They have their respective functions, no doubt. The funds of the state have to be audited, and then the funds of the state also, the records of the finances and funds of the state also have to be kept. Apart from the political office that is created under the Constitution, Section 192, with respect to commissioners, where the governor can appoint a commissioner for finance for also steer the economy or economic activities of the state. But in particular respect to the control of the fund in terms of keeping account and records of the fund of the state, that's where you find the Accountant General and then the Auditor General very, if you like, very important in that regard. So, in terms of actual relationship in carrying out their respective duties and the way our funds move around, I do know that the governor of a state or if you like, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as the executive chairman or the elected chairman of council, even though they are seen as yes, being the chief executives of those levels of government, when it comes to being the actual accounting officer of that state, let's take a ministry for instance, it is the permanent secretary in the case of the ministry, not quite the commissioner, as a matter of fact. And that is why even when the commissioner is appointed, the permanent secretary does not lose his public office functions, the same as the accountant general and the auditor general. Now, in terms of actual relationship with carrying out orders and authorities of the governor, it is the governor or the permanent secretary or the president, even if they are political offices and elected, that gives these directives and authorizations and approvals. I know that those who have had a stint in public service, by the grace of God, I was privileged to have got close in that regard and by handling some of those activities.
Okay.
Let me make the big factor here. Let's take a ministry with my current experience of a ministry. When the commissioner goes to cabinet, what I was doing then is I prepared the memos before even cabinet meeting, and then these memos will be done in a number of forms as required, 40 to 42, and then you take the cabinet office in the office of the secretary to the government, and then it will be distributed to all the commissioners before cabinet meeting. Now, when they get to cabinet meeting and deliberate on those memos, assuming when my commissioner wanted to carry out a project of government, and then, of course, like I said, the interface between the permanent secretary, myself, and then even the Bureau of Public Procurement, all of that, then the commissioner goes to cabinet with the file, deliberates and defends that proposal. Now he gets cabinet approval of that proposal. But that's not all. You haven't got money to carry out that proposal. Then it returns to the office. Of course, I will separate the extract from the minutes. The extracts carry the more direct and precise decisions in cabinet. Then goes to the next step to get the approval of Mr. Governor. And even when he gets the approval of Mr. Governor, he will have to go for the release of that fund. Now, it means that the governor, as chief executive of the state, will give approval to every project that will be carried out. First in cabinet, it presides over cabinet. So the approval, even the proposals in memo form for any, let's say you wanted to do the Christmas discount market at that time, then of course you would have to do a memo and you defend that memo. That is a technical way of preparing the memo. It has to go to cabinet. It has to be deliberated. And of course the governor can only override the views of other members of cabinet. But he's a liberal governor. He gets the approval first at that level. You will go back to Mr. Governor. And then for even the approval of the funding for that project, then before you will even get the release. So in that relationship, whether it's the accountant general or the commissioner in the Ministry of Finance, the governor, it all comes on the desk of the governor in terms of getting any project done.
I want you to register in your spirit, hence I'm as slow as possible in presenting this truth so that you understand
All right, 27 minutes to the top of the hour. I still have Barrister Ekine via the phone. Good evening to you. You're listening to Hard Facts on 92.3 Nigeria Info, and we are looking at the conversation when the governor was Accountant General. And so before the break, Barrister Ekine, you were telling us about the processes of governance, and you were telling us how, the permanent secretary and the civil servants will provide. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So you were telling us about the processes. The permanent secretary and civil servants will provide the details, the documents, the necessary documents, and it's in a memo form taken to cabinet meeting. In that cabinet meeting, the permission and approval will come from the governor. However, that does not mean funding takes place or funds are given. You would have to still follow up to get funds. And then I think that's where you stopped. Or were you saying the Accountant General signs off the funds and the commissioners go about doing the work? Is that what you were trying to say, or is that what you said? Let's get clearly now.
No. Yes, you got it from the point of doing the memo, getting to cabinet, and then cabinet considering the memo, giving approval, and then of course that the approval is in the end. You have to go back to the governor, and then you have to also get to the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
Now, the basic fundamental office with respect to finances and releases is in the Ministry of Finance. Now, recall that again, practically every department of government, every ministry, department, or agency of government, even the mainstream ministries, they have accountants, right? I'm building towards who the Accountant General then is. They have accountants, and then these accountants work in the, if you like, say, the accounts department of those ministries, departments, and agencies. And then, of course, they work under a supervisor, a person who is the chief of all the accountants in that government. So that's where the Accountant General more or less is. So the Accountant General is the chief accounting officer, is the chief accountant of all the accountants in government.
Okay.
Is not really the one that does the releases, okay, or even gives approval to releases, or gives approval to expenditure and expenses of government. Like I deliberately stated, the procedure of getting through a project. Even if you thought that we needed to do a road from point A to point B, the relevant Ministry of Government, maybe Ministry of Works, we do a proposal in that regard in memo form, and then it will be considered in cabinet by all members of cabinet, and of course presided over by Mr. Governor or Mr. President. Then when he gets that approval, of course, he takes that file and goes back to his ministry. He has a lot more of work to do to get back to the Ministry of Finance. The issue of availability of funds and then all of those considerations is within the Ministry of Finance. So the Commissioner for Finance is actually the custodian, really, with respect to finances of the state. And then you also have a situation where the Treasury, the entire Treasury, which will be about looking through the receipts and payments of government and the records and finances of government, of all the kinds of accounts that the government is required by law to have. That's where you have the Accountant General as the chief accounting officer. So you could see that the functions of that Accountant General will come clear within his responsibilities to include to serve as the chief accounting officer or the receipts and payments of government. He supervises the accountants in all the ministries, departments, and agencies. And then that's why you could actually even grow from the ranks as a public servant, from being probably an accountant in the Department of Accounts and Administration in any of the ministries, moving from one ministry to another. Is a public servant. Now, you will have to maintain and operate the accounts, whether it is the Consolidated Revenue Fund or some development fund where it exists, or contingency funds where they exist, or even other public funds. So they maintain and operate the accounts of the state in that regard. The Accountant General cannot release any money to any individual or even any commissioner or any head of ministry, department, or agency without the appropriate approvals and even order of releases.
Okay, so now my question is, if for any reason a probe is done and the findings of that probe finds an administration corrupt, the accountant general cannot be held liable in any way. It cannot be seen as a party to a criminal affair. It cannot be what's the word they usually
It can. Let me. I think I seem to understand what you're trying to establish. Okay. In our criminal code law or any criminal law, there's a definition as to parties to an offense. I think there's an acronym to any. So you may not be the person directly committing a criminal infraction, but there are other roles you could play, whether you're aiding or abetting, or whether you conspire with another person to commit a criminal infraction, or whether you aided some person to doing it, or in any form that you played a role to actualize the commission of an offense. You are an offender, you're a party to it.
Okay.
So, but to say directly that a public officer who acts upon the instruction or approval of another superior or another public officer may not be culpable if there is some infraction or an illegal activity, it's not conclusive. It is possible that you could be culpable. Even when you're carrying out your legitimate duty, you have a responsibility to advise candidly. And if you think that that's where we have a problem here, Kalada, that we seem not to have public officers in our part of the world that would want to live up their integrity to say that if I occupy a position and then someone is leading me in a way that is not right, and then I give my candid opinion and advice, and it's not accepted, you hear elsewhere they walk away.
Now, Henry, let's pause you. You've said that the accountant general cannot release money except he follows the process, or you called it the order of release, right?
There must be some authorization and even processes that gets to that point before accountant general will get involved, or any accountant in that regard.
Okay, now, and the process you've listed is a cumbersome one. First of all, it goes to cabinet or the executive meeting. Then there is there's the pursuing of funds, and then the various accountants from the various ministries will have an input, and then it gets to the table of the accountant general. So it's not just him. Can we then really say he's liable? He's a conspirator in any way? I mean, yes, it is his signature appended, but can we then say really, because is he supposed to follow how the money is spent, or is he supposed to trace what account it's going to? It's been given an approval, say pay XYZ person for XYZ contract. Is he supposed to do an investigation? Is that what the law says?
No, it's not required to do an investigation, but it's required to be prudent and professional in carrying out his duty and give direct policy direction or some kind of advice or opinion. Is regarded as an expert when it comes to doing his job. That's expected. It is the ideal situation. The accountant general can formulate accounting policies in the government and can give even advice. What if your governor is not an accountant in any way and he doesn't have any knowledge of accounting in any way? Even if he does, even if he's a chartered accountant and becomes a governor, and then if he's directing you in a manner that is contrary to the provisions of the law, and then even the standard principles of your profession, like I said here, the difference would then lie whether it is in this part of the world or elsewhere, where I can advise you. It is in every profession. The accountant general is a professional, is an accountant. It's the same even in law. If I have a client and you come into my office, and then I think that the brief you have brought to me, that's also the difference amongst us as professionals. The brief you have brought is such that will lead me into some misconduct. I advise you candidly. In fact, we are required as lawyers to advise our clients candidly. If it is a bad one, I tell you what it is. Sometimes we're even advised that if your client refuses to take your professional advice, then of course you reject that brief. So if you are a public officer and the accountant general, and then someone is telling you to probably go against standard operations and standard principles and rules, even in your profession, let alone to your knowledge that is asking you to commit an infraction, let us assume that's a criminal offense, and then you conspire with that principal officer, or you aid him to succeed, or in fact, you could commit an offense by even not taking an action. So it's either an action or inaction. So if you look the other way and you didn't take an action, you actually can also commit an offense. An offense not just by an action, even an omission to act.
Okay, so
I think in all cases, the Accountant General may not ipso facto on the face of it be liable because he's carrying out his professional official duty. But where it is found that he played a role to assist a person to commit an offense, then of course he will be culpable. It doesn't matter whether you are
when you say it is found, so just not giving professional advice is and not walking away can be seen as being a conspirator, if I got you clearly.
No, it's not. It's not just as simple as on the face of it. That you didn't resign your position, but you gave the candidate opinion and advice, and then the principal refused to take it. And let us say where you also do not play the next role, you wouldn't suffer any culpability.
So my point is, how do you prove that you gave candid advice? Because your signature is on the document, permitting.
It's not just signature. Your advice wouldn't just be oral, and that's where a diligent and professional, accountant general or any professional at that will give that opinion in some form that you can probably defend yourself. Right. I am not speaking right now for the former Accountant General of Rivers State, who is currently the governor, before anybody probably will accuse me of that. But let us just take a part of what he said, that he kept every record of everything he did. So it means that if he gave an opinion contrary to whatever was directed, he probably would have kept a record of it. And then sometimes too, when you give that candid opinion, and then the principal sees that, look, this particular officer isn't going to compromise and then to aid me to doing what I'm going to do, and he has given that opinion, you find usually that they will turn to someone else who probably also has a capacity to carry out that function or play that role.
Okay, to my next question now. So the governor can argue in court that I was just following approvals and I gave my candid opinion against this, but I was asked to sign, so I signed based on approval. So that will be a good argument in court with evidence, of course.
Kalada, if that signing is perfecting a criminal machination, a criminal design, that you gave a candid opinion and then you eventually gave effect to a criminal design, does not exculpate you from that criminal responsibility.
Okay, quickly, because time is running fast. There is the perpetual injunction in Rivers State. The governor, has been talking about probing past administration. He made mention of that last week. He's hinting at that already with that perpetual injunction staying up somewhere, hovering over, the skies of Rivers State.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I should speak further on that. Yes, absolutely, we can.
I'm wondering how.
The Rivers State Commission of Inquiry law has not been repealed and has not been rendered nugatory by any such, if you like, flouted perpetual injunction. It has become a cliche when it comes to discussion with respect to accountability and responsibility with public funds in Rivers State. Everybody will now refer to a certain I have taken the time to x-ray that perpetual injunction associated with the former governor of Rivers State, Sir Dr. Peter Audley, with respect to him. But I've taken time to look at all the actions that were in court at that time. There were different cases that nobody seemed to have linked one onto another, and then to really examine what that really meant. It's for me, it's not a blanket to cover anybody that assumed public office in Rivers State to pilfer away our fund. The gentleman at the time was exiting office, and then there was an investigation by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission with respect to the issues about public funds in Rivers State, and then the investigation was actually in the Rivers State House of Assembly. So he was, I said the other time on TV that it was a preemptive action. He was trying to preempt the EFCC so that they would not arrest him when he leaves office. I think that was 2007 or thereabout.
Yeah,
and then he took out that action. But whatever it was, I have always held a view that cannot be a blanket to stop anybody from investigating any public fund.
Mr. Ekine, let's pause for a bit now. See, so I think the perpetual injunction said if I can, summarize or, put it in my own words, something like this, that officials of the River State government and the River State government cannot be investigated. So when you have a perpetual
it's important to read by whom?
By financial institutions, of course, the FCC, ICPC, and the likes. Yeah, I agree with that one.
And there was a background to that. Some of the argument had been that those are federal institutions and that the fund belongs to the state. So that you asked me a question. I am very careful about it. You talked about the River State Commission of Inquiry. The River State Commission of Inquiry is not a federal institution. The argument was that if the National Assembly enacted a law that established the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and then if the fund of a state is alleged to have been misappropriated, which will amount to a financial crime, that was it justifiable, or was it in the contemplation of the National Assembly when the EFCC was established to also have the power, the jurisdiction to question as to how a state fund is no longer a federal fund when it leaves the federation account from the consolidated revenue fund of the federation, that's the federal government, to a state account, the state consolidated revenue fund, whether a federal agency, but assuming you have a state economic and financial crimes agency, it can investigate.
Okay, so
and that's why the River State Commission of Inquiry law that empowers the executive of a state to be able to set up a commission. I recall that this commission we talk about is a fact-finding body, more or less, is an inquiry that is to be done into the activities of a public institution or a public officer or an agency of government.
Okay, now I want to throw this question now. Some people would likely argue that if we had a state inquiry commission, that it will be used to witch hunt, political players from the same state. So, is there a possibility that the governor can set aside that petrol injunction, for that to be a book that can be widely appreciated, because there will be the federal government, in this case, maybe the FCC, maybe the IC, maybe the police. Is it possible, for that to happen? Petrol injunction.
Let me take out first your technical question. What's witch hunt? And why would we be talking about witch hunt whenever we talk about investigating a public officer? All the investigations that go on every day by our arresting and investigative authorities, how much have we talked about witch hunting? If it is even witch hunting, let us witch hunt the public officers that pilfer away our money. But that's by the way. The River State, or any state in that regard, the River State Commission of Inquiry law has no provision in that law with reference to witch hunting. Has no provision at all in that law that empowers the executive, the governor, to set up a commission of inquiry. Why would we, anytime this kind of issue comes up, for us to seek to interrogate how a public officer conducted himself in office, and then we say it's witch hunting? It is unfortunate that you will even hold a public office and work for somebody for 8 years, and you shouldn't be asked a question why and how you handle the person's facilities. Even in my office here, we do our periodic reviews. I can actually even ask the staff in the office. Most law firms, they even do their reviews of their case files probably every Friday or every Monday. So you now have elected officials that will take office for 4 years. There is no account of stewardship. That's why they behave the way they behave. And we don't have any law that has clearly provided that from time to time that a public office holder should and shall give account of stewardship. So if you never had that in 4 years, you work for 8 years, you manage and presided over public fund, especially where it's even seen apparently and truly so that most times our politicians, not just in River State, have shown the tendency to misappropriate funds. Then you now say, if somebody says, look, let us read, and it's not just about even investigating about fund management, really. Commission of inquiry could actually even be instituted to find out how the previous government did something right. What about that? What are we not thinking about that?
I've just got
consciously emulate how to do things better this time.
I've just got 60 seconds. So can we touch on the what's it called now? Perpetual injunction being set aside.
I've always argued that every decision of a trial court, a lower court, can be set aside on appeal. And I also argue that there is no real time that will stop a dissatisfied person. What really happens is that if the time stipulated by law within which to appeal against a judgment elapses, what the law requires is that you will take out a step to seek the leave of either the trial court or the appellate court, particularly the appellate court, when the time to appeal has elapsed, to still carry out that appeal. What you may suffer is payment of penalties. It happens even in other matters.
Okay.
Maybe you and me now could have disputes because it's not state, and then I was supposed to appeal against a judgment. I can run out of time, and I will still appeal against it. But because it is about politics and politicians and public fund, it seems as if it's entirely a different thing that cannot be appealed against, that cannot be set aside. Even if it has taken 5 years, 8 years, the most that the appellant will suffer is paying penalty for that long time.
All right.
And again, you will need to justify the appellate court to grant that leave for you to appeal.
All right, so the governor, but I've got to go. It's so sad that we can't complete our conversation because I've got so many other questions. But thank you very much, Ekine, for your time. Thank you. I appreciate.
Thank you very much, Kalada, and I do hope that sometimes when we make these interventions, that will make sense at all. But
right.
Thank you for.
Sharp guy like to watch Premier League, FA Cup, Niger dramas, Olympics, BB Niger, and many more. Sharp guys sabi save money too, even as cost of things they go up. Go TV subscription.